to the next step of our percent work, which is finding percents of numbers and also finding if you've got two numbers or one number out of another number, what percentage would that be? And there's a ton of ways to do these. You know, a lot of these you're going to be able to do mentally, and you probably won't even have to use this process. I'm hoping we get to that point anyways, because estimation is, you know, it's really a big deal to figure these out. But these are the types of problems you're going to be looking at. This would be like 25% of 24 equals what number? And for this problem right here, this is one that I would hope that you could just do mentally without having to do a lot of work. 25% is like 1/4. So what's 1/4 of 24? Well, 24 divided by 4 is 6. So 25% of 24 is 6. It's like in quarters. So 25% would be 6, 50% would be 12, 75% would be 18, and then the whole 100% is 24. Over here, 6 out of 20, I'm hoping you could do this mentally as well. We've talked about in the other sections, if you can get this bottom number to be 100, the top number is going to be your percentage. So we want to know equals what percentage. So 6 out of 20, if we can get it out of 100, that should be pretty easy. That's just times by 5. There's 5 20s in 100. Multiply that by 5. 30 out of 100 is 30%. We probably didn't have to do a lot of work for this. You could probably do that in your head. The one key for what we're going to be doing today is you have to be able to recognize what's the whole. What's 100% equal to? In this problem, 100% was equal to 24. In this problem, 100% was equal to 20, and that's always going to be your starting point. Again, these mentally, you should be able to do these without doing a lot of work. The ones that we're coming up with, you'll probably have to do a little bit more work for, and that's all right. I'm going to show you a process that you can kind of adapt in a lot of different ways today to fit what you want to do with this. But this actually is going to relate a lot to the ratio stuff we did last year in 6th grade. So we'll kind of see how this goes. I think I'm going to split this one up into two different videos because I think there'll be kind of a lot going into this. So here's my first set, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to split these into two different sides here. And you'll see as we're going, these are basically the same problems just backwards. And I'm going to show you how using the exact same thing can get you the answer to both of these. So in this one right here, it's 15% of 580. So we're trying to figure out equals what number? What number would be 15% of 580? Over here, we're trying to figure out what percentage is 87 out of 580. So like for instance, if you shot 87 or 580 free throws and you made 87 of them, well, what percentage would that be? Which obviously wouldn't be very much. I would hope that to start with, you would look at these and come up with some kind of an estimate. Like on this one, well, 15% is not going to be a very big part of 580. So have a ballpark number of, you know, what you think it might be. The same thing out here. 87 is not going to be very much of 580. What percentage could that be? Always think that way first before you start this process. So now let's start the process. The first thing we got to do is we got to identify in both of these problems what is 100%. 580 is the whole thing. That's 100%. Same thing over here. 580, that's the whole thing. That's 100%. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to start with 580 equals 100%. And I might make two charts for this. I may only need to make one because I want to show you how using the same thing could get you the answer to both of them. So what I want to do here is I need to figure out some way to get 15%, and 100% is way too high. What we did with our ratio stuff is we used multiplication and division to come up with different components that we could use. Here's what I mean. So let's take this 100%. 100% is too high because it's way bigger than 15%. Let's get it to something we can work with. Now there's nothing we can divide 100% by to get down to the 15% we need. Well, there's something, but it's not going to be like a whole number. So I'm going to start by doing something that's pretty easy. I'm going to divide it by 10. If I divide it by 10, that gets me down to 10% equals, then I just divide this by 10. What's nice about dividing by 10 is it's just like getting rid of that 0, so it's 58. So we know 10% is 58. Now that's still not 15%, but this should get us somewhere. So this is something else we know now. We know that 58 is 10% of the total. We need to get that extra 5% so we can make 15%. Well, that's actually going to be fairly easy. If I take what I have here now, how do I get from 10% to 5%? Pretty simple. Divided by 2. That's going to get me 5%. Let's take this and divide it by 2. 58 divided by 2 is going to be 29, I believe. So now we've got 29 is 5%. We also have 58 is 10%. Let's just go ahead and put those two together. 10% and 5%, if we add those together, is 15%. 58 and 29, if we add those together, is 87. So we can come to the conclusion and say that 15% of 580 is 87. And that ended up being pretty simple. There's a ton of ways you could do this. I mean, for instance, I could start by maybe instead of dividing by 10, maybe I want to divide by 20. If I divided that by 20 to start with, the 580 equals 100%, divided by 20, let's say, that's going to get me now 100% divided by 20 is 5%. 580 divided by 20, let me figure out what that is here. I'm just going to use my calculator real quick. 580 divided by 20, that's 29. So this is another number you could use right here. And if you think about this, how many 5% do I need for 15%? Well, I need 3 of them. So if I do 5% times 3, that's 15%. 29 times 3, that's going to be our 87 right there as well. So you can be very flexible with these. You could also go down to what 1% is. You know, this might throw some people off with some decimal use, but it really shouldn't. Let's say I had 580 equals 100%. Let's say I want to divide by 100 to get down to 1%. 100 divided by 100 is 1, so that's 1%. So now I have to divide this by 100. 580 divided by 100 is 5.8. So now I have this, 1% equals 5.8. I want to get to 15%. Well, it should be pretty simple. How do you get from 1% to 15%? Times 15. There's 15%. Over here, if I times that by 15, that's 87. Very flexible use with this. Now, on the other side here, we already know the answer to this is going to be 15% because this is just these two problems backwards. But how could you come up with 15%? Well, let me show you. We can start the same way. We could start with 580 equals 100% like we did over there. Okay? Let's say we want to, I don't know, we could do a lot of different things here. Let's say I wanted to take this, and now we're really focusing on the number part here. Or we could focus on the percentage part. Doesn't matter. Just something we can divide to make these numbers smaller. Because our goal now is we don't care about the percentage. We're trying to find the percentage. We need to get 87 on this side and then look to the other side to see what the percentage is going to be. So if I did that, maybe I'd want to divide by 2. Okay? If I divide it by 2, that's going to be 50%. I'd have to divide this by 2 also, and that's going to be, let's see, 250 plus 30. 280? That doesn't make sense. Let me make sure I'm right here. Nope, 290, sorry. 290. Okay? We're still way too big because we want to figure out what 87 out of 580 is. So we're too big here. So let's go ahead and maybe divide this by 10. How about? So we'll divide this by 10. Now 50% divided by 10 is 5%. And then if I do this divided by 10, that's going to be 29. So we know 29 is 5%. Now I have to get to 87. So maybe we could just count up and see what we can get to here. So maybe I can do, we know 5% is 29. Let's add another 29, which would be adding another 5% because 29 is 5%. Now we're at 10% equals 29 plus 29 would be 58. Maybe let's try adding another 29. Add another 29, which is like adding another 5%. That's going to be 15% equals 87. You can be very flexible with these. I could have subtracted too. I could have started at, I don't know, maybe I get this right here, and maybe I figure out that 29 is 5%. Maybe I just keep taking off 29s and keep taking off 5% until I get to 87. Lots of ways you can do this. Just make sure that you're flexible with it. Here's another example I'm going to give you here. And I'll start with, let's see, how about I'll start with this one over here this time, okay? But in either case, this one we're looking for 20 or 62% of 550 or 255. So this is my whole thing. This is my 100%. Here, I'm looking for 255, which is my 100%. What's 158.1 out of 255? So we have a decimal this time. So I'm going to set this up. 255 is my 100%. So I'm going to go right away and I'm going to divide by 100 and figure out what 1% is. Divide by 100. 1%. Over here, I'm going to do the same thing. Divide by 100. And that's going to be 2.55. Hopefully you see a pattern with dividing by tens and dividing by hundreds, where dividing by tens, you're just moving the decimal point over one spot. Dividing by 100, you're moving it over two spots. So now I've got 2.55 is 1%. So a key is we need to get this to be 158.1. So we could try to figure out, well, how many 2.55s go into 158.1? So I could just do a simple problem here and do 158.1 divided by 2.55. And if I did that, 158.1 divided by 2.55 equals 62. So that means it took 62 of these to make 158.1. So now we got the grand total we need. So now I just need to multiply this side by 62, and that'll be a pretty simple one. 62%. So my answer to this one is 62% is 158.1. On the other side here, if I wanted to find what's 62% of 255, obviously it's going to be 158.1, but how could we come up with that? Well, we could do it a lot of ways. Equals, oops, let me backtrack here a little bit. We need to start with our 100%, which is this, equals 100%. So there are a lot of things we could do. 62% is what we need to get to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide by, how about 5? Because I know 100 divided by 5 is 20. 20% equals, and now I need to divide this by 5 also. So I'll do 255 divided by 5, and that's 51. So we're off to a pretty good start here. Because now, if you think about it, 51 equals 20%. So another 51 would be 20%. Another 51 would be 20%. So now we're up to 20, 40, 60. 60% is 51, 102, 153, 153. Now we're real close. We need to get 62%. So we're going to figure out some way to get this extra 2%. And I think the easiest way to do that is figuring out what 1% is. So I'm going to go back to the top here. And actually, I'm not going to go back to the top because right over here, we figured out what 1% is. I took the starting amount, which we had here. I divided it by 100 and got 1%. 100% divided by 100 is 1%. 255 divided by 100 is 2.55. So every 1% is 255. So I'm going to do 1%, 1%, 2.55, 2.55. Let's add these up. 60, 61, 62. That's what we want is 62%. 153 plus 2 plus 2 plus